A good portion of meaning is inferred by our nonverbal communication skills. What does that mean? That means other people hallucinate what you are meaning, what you are intending. So what we want to do is make sure that whatever you are intending is what they're hallucinating. Right?
That is my good friend Chad Dumas, an award-winning researcher, leadership expert, and the author of the Teacher Team Leader Handbook. In today's episode, Chad brings his signature energy and wisdom to unpack the essential role of teacher team leaders in schools. We'll dive into practical strategies for launching high-functioning teams, overcoming common obstacles, and making sure your collaboration efforts truly lead to student success. Regardless if you're new to leading a PLC for the first time or looking to elevate your current practices, this conversation is packed with real-world advice for you to use right away. This brand new resource is phenomenal, and I can't wait to jump into the conversation with my brilliant friend, Chad Dumas. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. Welcome back, Aspire Leaders. I'm so excited about our conversation today because I have someone that's been on the podcast before, episode 152, the wonderful Chad Dumas. Thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and congratulations. You have a brand new book out. I'm so excited to talk about that today, talk about the origin and some of the impactful things that are packed in this book. But before we do that, Chad, will you just kind of give us a little updates between the last time we talked and where you are today?
Yeah, really excited. For a full-time gig, I get to work with amazing educators like your listeners every day, right, all over this country. And a large portion of my work is around PLC at work, RTI at work, assessment, and priority schools work. And so it's really a blessing to work with amazing educators all over the country every day of the week, just about every day. And the last 2 years, I've been really intensely focused on this book that we're going to be talking about. So that's taken a good chunk of my time, and have a couple of others in the works as well. But yeah, that's kind of where I've been.
Of course you have a couple in the works. You're a right machine. All right, so let's talk about the book. Again, congratulations. It's the Teacher Team Leader Handbook, Simple Habits to Transform Collaboration in a PLC at Work. And then, I want to talk about the origin, Chad. So, I know you've been doing for a long time work with PLCs and just impacting education as a whole for so long. Will you just share a little bit about why you created this resource?
Absolutely. So we know that if you want to improve student learning, you get the adults working together in teams to improve their practice.
Yeah.
Like that's a surefire way to make sure that you can improve student learning. So teams are that engine. And in order for teams to be effective, we find that there needs to be someone who's in a designated teacher leadership position. And maybe that's a department chair or a grade level head or a instructional coach, or somebody who just is like, okay, nobody else is doing it. I'll take the lead, right? So what we find is that principals generally identify somebody who's going to serve in a teacher leadership role. And then we anoint them and say, go be a teacher leader, right? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And the problem is that the skills associated with teacher leadership with colleagues while there are parallels to being a good teacher, the skills are slightly different. So what I did in this book is try to raise for teacher team leaders, what are your responsibilities? I've never seen anybody articulate the responsibilities of a teacher team leader. Like these are the things you got to do. And I identify 3 things that are the responsibility. Like if you're a teacher team leader, let's be very clear. These are your 3 responsibilities. And then I also go through and I say, okay, so what are some assumptions that might be helpful? And what are some mindsets to help you to maximize your effectiveness? So taken together, your responsibilities, your assumptions, and your mindsets go to who you are as a person. So in order to be an effective teacher team leader, just as an effective leader, we have to think about who you are, your being. Then with that lens, with that clarity of who you are, then there are skills that can help maximize your effectiveness. So the book is in 2 parts. One is who you are, and the second part is what you do. And so then the what you do gets into about 40. I think there are actually exactly 40
Oh, wow.
moves, techniques, and strategies that you can use as a teacher team leader to maximize your own and the team's effectiveness. And those are categorized by getting started, building momentum, overcoming obstacles, and refining your skills. Then the book closes with think about 7 or 8 real world examples of challenges that teacher team leaders have shared with me, where I pull together all of the work from the book and say, okay, so if you're addressing or if you're experiencing this challenge, here are some actions that you might take from everything else in the book to help address those challenges. So it comes out of the real world, right? From actual
Yes.
teams who are engaging in this work, team leaders, who you are and what you do.
Oh, I love it so much. All right. So there's a lot to unpack there, Chad. So let's go
Yeah, yeah,
back
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
the very beginning, right? Like who they are. So many of us, get tapped on the shoulder. Hey, we want you to be a leader. A lot of us don't know what that is, the role is. You talked about 3 key responsibilities for
Yes.
these teacher team leaders in the PLC. So do you mind just defining what those are and kind of what the role should be for these folks?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 responsibilities of a teacher team leader. The third one is the one that people typically talk about, and I would argue is the least important of the 3, and that is to get stuff done, to do the work. So that is one of the responsibilities, but it's actually the least important. The other 2 responsibilities are more important. The first responsibility is to make it safe. Your responsibility as a teacher team leader is to create a psychologically safe environment so all voices are heard and all perspectives are shared so we can move forward. If you don't have a psychologically safe environment, it doesn't matter about those other 2 responsibilities. So that's your first responsibility, make it safe. And then the second responsibility is to build capacity. Many times with teams that I'm working with, one person, the teacher team leader, just does the work of the team, which is responsibility 3, but they're not building the capacity of each other to do the work, right? And so building capacity involves understanding why you're doing the work and what it is that you're doing. And we're sharing that load amongst each other. So those are the 3 responsibilities. Number 1, make it safe. Number 2, build capacity. And number 3, do the work.
Yeah, it's beautiful and very simple, which I absolutely
Mhm.
love for our educators here. You had talked about some roadblocks or obstacles that teachers may find in this role. Curious what
Mhm.
some of the biggest ones they'll face, and then also how can our leaders overcome them?
Yeah. The challenges that I identified or actually asked teacher team leaders who I was working with, what are the challenges? And so I can think through these and put together some responses.
Sure.
So they tend to be things around team effectiveness. So
Mm.
things like members don't follow the norms, members don't follow through on the decisions, members don't come to meeting prepared. Those are some of the types of challenges. And so how do you set up the environment so that those things can happen? And so it boils down to, first of all, making sure that you're doing those 3 responsibilities, and then many times some foundational things. So I identify in the getting started chapter what are some things that need to be in place to be effective. And now, whether or not you've been quote unquote doing PLCs forever or you're brand new, this getting started chapter really lays out those foundational elements. And some of them might be things that are like, oh, okay, yeah, we've got that. So then what I provide with each of those moves, techniques, or strategies is tools to help you with it, reflective questions, and next level implementation tips. So if you're already, for example, have an agenda, that's getting started, right? Teams need to have an agenda. And that might sound, well, of course, Chad, you wouldn't believe how many teams that I get to go to that don't have an agenda. Well, if you do have an agenda, guess what? I have a couple of templates for you that might be helpful to further refine your practice. And in addition to that, I provide some next level tips that combine some of the other moves, techniques, or strategies. For example, have your agenda as a third point. So that way everybody can see it as opposed to just on your computer screen. Let's project it so that everybody can see what it is and we can work our way through it. So so anyway, the challenges, I mentioned a few challenges there, and then those are addressed throughout the text as well, thinking about how to get started, how to build momentum, overcome obstacles, and refine your own individual skills. And I'd also mention that a good portion of the skills that are shared are, you might call them communication intelligence skills, We know that meaning, a good portion of meaning is inferred by our nonverbal communication skills. What does that mean? That means other people hallucinate what you're meaning, what you are intending. So what we want to do is make sure that whatever you are intending is what they're hallucinating, right?
Yes.
Because others are going to hallucinate. So I raise moves and techniques that are from the communication intelligence world, from Michael Grinder and Kendall Zoller and others. Things like credible and approachable voice, breathing, the pause, the use of laughter and humor. These are some of the moves and techniques that help to smooth over, if you will, the communication, because we know that people are going to infer from what you say. We want to make sure that they're inferring what you want them to infer. And many times we don't think about that. We just let our communication intelligence skills go on autopilot. And what I do is raise for the teacher team leader, hey, these are maybe some things that maybe you can think about, practice, video record yourself, watch it, get feedback from other people, practice with other people, et cetera, so that you can make sure that other people are hallucinating what you want them to hallucinate.
Well, I'm so glad you said that. I actually just had a aspiring leader. She's in a program with her district, just reach out to me, and specifically on like communication, it's these things that are just not taught. And I did this too as a leader. You assign someone and you just assume that over time they'll build these skills. And they're so important to have that communication, but then also the strategies that you're referring to. I want to go back to what you had talked about with making it safe. And, the first thing I associate with that was the word trust, a culture of trust. And so how can our team leaders or teacher team leaders foster that within the PLC, and then also get that feeling that environment is safe for them? Because if they don't trust the process, trust you, trust the environment itself, that things are going to get done, obviously not a whole lot of work is going to happen.
Yeah. So there was a fascinating study done by Google 7 or 8 years ago, and it's affectionately called the Aristotle Project. Don't ask me why, but the Aristotle Project, where they studied, I think, 190 teams to find out which teams at Google are the most effective. And of course, many of us would have our hypotheses around what makes a team effective. Is it their expertise? Is it that they get along with each other? Is it high levels of education? Is it the quality of snacks that they have at their meetings, right? We all have some hypotheses. And what they found is that none of those are actually what makes for an effective team. What makes for an effective team is psychological safety. And there's 2 elements in particular. Number 1 is social sensitivity. What does social sensitivity mean? This means that we can read each other's body language, that I can tell by your facial expressions and your body language and your tone, Josh, I must have said something that ticked you off. What's going on? Share it, give me your thoughts, right? Like, that's social sensitivity. So that is, in my book, that's the moves and techniques. That's you as a leader building your own social sensitivity skills to be able to help others with that work. And of course, then that helps others as well. So that's the first thing that leads to an effective team, according to the Aristotle Project. The second thing is an equity of turn taking. So on teams that were effective, no one person dominated the meetings, and no one person was just sitting silent throughout all the meetings. Rather, there was an equity. Now, that doesn't mean it's equal. Like, it wasn't, hey, everybody's got 3 minutes and go, right? No. But there was an equity of voice so that everyone has an opportunity and they feel safe, right? That's back to that psychological safety. So as a teacher team leader, in order to make it safe, we have to make sure we're doing those 2 things. We're recognizing and building in social sensitivity, and we're building in equity of turn taking. Now, you also mentioned trust. Interestingly enough, they don't really study that so very much in that study. What I would offer is that many times people think that once trust is established, then we can be effective. And there's actually research the opposite, that if you want to be effective, it requires vulnerability first. You, as the teacher team leader, have to express vulnerability in order to build trust. So now that doesn't mean that you express incompetence
or air your dirty laundry.
Or air your dirty, right? That's not what that means.
Yeah.
What it means is things like, Hey, colleagues. So one of the things I was thinking about this week is in this lesson, I was thinking about trying X, Y, and Z, but wasn't sure how it might go. What do you think? That's being vulnerable, right? Or I tried X, Y, and Z, and X didn't go so well. What are your thoughts? So, as a teacher team leader, you can start building trust by being vulnerable yourself about your practice, and then that helps to then create that trusting environment.
All right, I want to talk about some powerful strategies for our team leaders in regards to that third step, which is like getting things done, which is
Yep,
may sound like the easiest of them all,
yep.
but there's also a sense with PLCs too of building momentum. And I'm just curious
Mhm.
how they can get that momentum started, but then also sustain the progress that's built.
Yeah, absolutely. So the part two of the book, which is what the teacher team leader does, right? Part one is who you are, and then part two is what you do.
Hmm.
Each of those chapters then is divided into moves and techniques. So those are things that you do as a teacher team leader, and strategies, things that we do. So what I do and what we do. And the I do is the moves and techniques, like I've been talking about. Those are the communication intelligence skills around use of voice, hand gesture, breathing, laughter and humor, third point, pausing. These are the moves and techniques that you take as an individual. And then there's strategies that we take as a team. And there are a bunch of those. And some of them are, for example, I mentioned the use of an agenda. That is a strategy that the team needs to have in place. Now, any old agenda won't do, right? We have to have the agenda focused on the right stuff. And in the PLC at work world, that agenda means the four critical questions. That every meeting, that's what we're honed in on. One or more of those four critical questions, which are what do we want students to know and be able to do? How are we going to know that they know it? What are we going to do when they don't know it? And what are we going to do when they do know it? So, creating agenda and having some kind of a template to make sure that we're working our way through that. Another strategy that I raise is to plan the work and work the plan. Many times we just get going and week to week and we're just doing our stuff and we get caught in, Stephen Covey would say, the thick of thin things. And what I propose is that to help the team maximize their effectiveness, the team leader needs to help the team step out and say, let's plan the work. Let's figure out over the course of the next quarter or trimester or semester or year, what are we going to accomplish? And let's give ourselves kind of like some tentative timelines and agenda. So this week and this week, we're going to focus in on critical question one for upcoming unit. And we're going to really get really clear about that. And then this week and this week, we're going to get really clear about how we're going to know the kids know it. And then we're going to have the unit. Right? So that those weeks around critical question one or two are happening before the unit starts, which is sometimes an aha for people. Many times folks are in the middle of their unit and now they're starting to figure out what they want kids to know and be able to do. No, that's got to happen before the unit starts. So a strategy that the teacher team leader can employ to maximize effectiveness is to help the team plan the work and work the plan. And I share some templates and tools to help with that. Another strategy is to have norms that are collaboratively developed and revisited regularly. Together with norms, roles. Individual members of the team take on roles. Now, it doesn't have to be a life sentence, but we do need to have some kind of, maybe by month we switch it up. So we've got somebody who's keeping track of time, somebody who's making sure we've got the resources, somebody who's taking notes. So these are some of the strategies to help lay that foundation and help to build momentum moving forward.
So thinking through like the revisiting of things and maybe even just a reflective process, how often are you asking the teacher leaders to go through that to make sure that they're not only bettering themselves, but then also the whole PLC process?
Yeah. In the book, I have reflective tools for them
Yeah.
to use. I don't necessarily say, hey, this is how often you should do that. In many schools, in PLC at work schools, there's
Mhm.
what's referred to as a guiding coalition. And we advocate for that guiding coalition to meet at least every 2 weeks. So, as part of that guiding coalition process, those teacher team leaders would behoove them to reflect periodically as part of that. I know Bill Ferreter has a book called The Big Book of Tools for Collaborative Teams, and he advocates for at least quarterly for teams to reflect on their practice. laid that out specifically, that's probably not a bad timeline for teacher team leaders
Yeah.
to also reflect on their practice as their team is reflecting.
Regardless, the reflection process is important and is reflected in your book based on the reflection time that you've built in there.
Absolutely. And I have, as part of the book, there's almost 50 tools to go with those 40 different actions that teacher team leaders take.
All right. So typically toward the end of our conversation, Chad, we have a piece of advice for our aspiring and current leaders. I'm going to kind of twist it a little bit to kind of mold it to what we've talked about today. It's going to be very similar, but so it's advice for our brand new teacher leaders in the PLC space, but aren't feeling as effective as they maybe had in their mind. So what's some advice for them in this role for the first time?
My advice to any leader, whether it's first time or long in tooth, you might say, is that who you are matters. It's not just about what you do. The skills are important. More important is who you are. And that if you don't have clarity about your own personhood as a leader, that you don't have clarity about your responsibilities, about the assumptions that you bring into your work, about mindsets that lead to action, the skills that you might develop will never be as effective without clarity of who you are. So always start with who you are, because who you are matters.
Very well said. All right, Chad, I've been throwing up your website on the screen for those who've been watching on YouTube, nextlearningsolutions.com. Obviously, you can head over there. There's going to be a ton of resources and ways to connect with Chad. But is there any other social media or anything else that I can direct our listeners to get more information about all the wonderful things that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Twitter, it's at Chad Dumas. I got on Twitter, or I guess it's X now, early on, whatever it is. Yeah, Chad Dumas. So ChadDumas. So there's 2 D's in the middle. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, real quick for folks, because we've talked a little bit about some of the services and things you provide to districts, but will you just kind of expand on that just so people understand too? You're not just an author. I mean, you're doing so much more than just that.
Yeah, absolutely. I get to work with amazing educators all over the country. So I speak, I train, I coach, all of that stuff. One of the things that folks can look forward to is a Teacher Team Leader Academy based on this book that will take folks through the who you are and what you do, digging into each of those specific moves, techniques, and strategies, and coaching teacher team leaders in being more effective in that process. So they can look forward to seeing more about
perfect
Teacher Team Leader Academy.
Yeah. So would they go to your website for more information in regards to the Academy?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I'll make sure everything is in the show notes for those who are listening. I'll make sure there's a link also for the book so you can get your hands on this wonderful resource that's going to really impact a lot of folks. The Teacher Team Leader Handbook is the name of the book again. And man, Chad, it is such a pleasure and honor to have you back on the show for a second time. And it was great to connect with you, learn about what you've been doing the last couple of years, and to learn more about this fantastic book.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure and honor. Thank you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.